I started in data science like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, maybe. It's been a while. And nowadays, when people talk about evals, people say like, look at your data, look at your data, look at your data. It's a good like lesson. People should definitely do it. But the thing that always struck me that's interesting about it is that I had been doing that for like ages. 15 years ago, it was also a problem. And the best way to explain the problem in my mind is to also talk about this one data set that I tended to use for teaching. This is the chick weight data set. For those of you that remember, this came with the R language. It's like one of those data sets that R came packaged with. And the data set has weight, it has time, it has a specific chicken. So different chickens are eating a specific diet over time, so to say, right? So this chicken had this diet, and as time moved forward, this chicken started gaining some weight. Like that's basically the story. And there's lots and lots of these chickens, right? So as I scroll over here, you can see lots of these chickens, basically. And note, by the way, what we're looking at here is a Marimo notebook. Whenever you output a data frame, we get a nice interactive widget with lots of bells and whistles. There's a button over here. We just added it. So what I could do is I could explore, let's say, the diet column. There's all sorts of descriptive statistics. There's like pretty charts and stuff, especially if you've got a time series. This is very nice. But of course, we're not going to like stare at a data frame like this. What you typically would do is you would make a chart. So if you wanted to maybe summarize the data a bit, you would do something that looks a little bit like this. You would basically say like, look, for every chicken over time, we've got this little dot. So we've got time on the x-axis over here. We've got weight on the y-axis. And then for all of these different diets, we can also make like an average line. So we can see that there's this diet 3 over here that seems to be doing quite well compared to some of these other diets. And this is just doing summary statistics. You could also apply TensorFlow or scikit-learn if you want to do something fancy and predictive. But what a lot of people would do in data science is they would sort of look at this and go like, okay, diet 3 is best, business case closed. And we have a chart here that shows us that that's accurate. And I would argue that, this is a common practice, but what I've just done is not looking at your data. What I've just done is staring at your data. Because the number one thing that people always forgot to do whenever they were looking at a chart is that you shouldn't just look at it and then move on. What you should do is you should actually force yourself to look at the damn thing for like 5 minutes. Because 9 times out of 10, something weird is happening, but you have to look for it. And in this case, because we're using Altair, we can actually do a cool thing. We can add interactive on the chart object itself. And when we do that, we actually get a chart that we can move around, and we get a chart that we can zoom into. And when you do that, suddenly something interesting happens, because it seems like there are some chickens over here that are actually losing weight. And, presumably this is like a data set with chickens from like a feedlot. So that shouldn't really be happening. And if you squint your eyes, you can actually see another instance of that here. I don't know exactly, you can't see right now if this chicken eventually lost weight or if it was a different one, but you do see that there's a point over here that's lower than anything that happened before. So there are also chickens that are losing weight. And again, that's just kind of weird. That should maybe not happen. Like that's kind of a smell there, right? And whenever you smell something, you should chase it. But one lesson here is you can only chase a smell if you take the time to sniff. And if you took this effort, like if you notice this one phenomenon, you can make a different chart, which is this one, and then you could outline all these different chickens, and then you would definitely notice that some chickens actually died prematurely. So there's one chicken over here that died prematurely, there's another one here, and like 5 chickens out of this entire group actually died before, let's say, the final date. Given that, what does this line actually represent? I mean, yeah, you're going to calculate the mean of all the chickens over here, but you're going to not count the 5 chickens that died prematurely. Therefore, this line doesn't matter. And the only way you've got, and I want to stress this, the only way you've gotten that conclusion right is if you actually looked at the data and you didn't stare at it. And like that's a lesson I think that we should remind ourselves of also in this day and age of LLMs. Like it's very easy to come up with a flashy demo, but you got to be very critical. And maybe what we got to do is come up with tools that help us. So back in the day when I was teaching this for the first time, we had static charts. One thing that's really cool about Altair is nowadays we've got these more interactive charts, right? So I can actually pan and zoom in and stuff. But interactivity is only part of the story. And what I want to showcase today is how reactivity is actually the cherry on top that you might want as well. Before moving on to that, though, I just want to make sure, Hamal, any questions about this?
Yeah, I mean, I
Because
could pepper you
I
with
see you
questions all
thinking of
day.
it.
Um, just out of curiosity, like, is there any intuition behind the design decision to put the plot above the code? That's interesting, right? Like,
Oh, right. I mean, that's a setting. So to be clear, that's a setting.
oh,
You can
okay.
configure this. Well, one thing that's kind of unique about Marimo, and let me explain that first. So we're now going to go to part two because that's the bit where I can maybe explain that. So these are three cells, and like if you were doing stuff inside of Jupyter, let's say, right? Like you would run this cell, you would run the next one, you would run the next one, like Shift Enter, that shortcut,
Hmm.
and you could then also maybe do something like I don't know, A minus B plus C. You could have a cell like this. But the thing in Marimo is we can say, well, the order of the cells don't really matter.
Can I
And
stop you for 1 second? Because you did something that is on my mind. You have these like notebooks in like a continuous canvas or something. What is going on?
oh, I've got columns.
Oh, you have columns.
Yes.
Okay, so you can do that. So that's like a Marimo thing? That's like a unique
It's
kind of
one
thing?
of the many Marimo things, but yes, that's a setting you
Okay.
can add. So I don't want to press the button now because the whole screen will move, but you can have like very wide cells or very thin cells. Some people like the linear thing. I really like to have columns because then one column is typically like boilerplate setup, and then the next column is like slightly more interesting stuff, and then you can have levels of abstraction kind of logically,
Hmm.
right? But this also kind of falls into the category of, well, the order of cells doesn't necessarily matter. Uh, I could move this into another column and the code would still run. And the reason why is because we do a little trick. So imagine that you're the notebook and you have a cell over here that says, I want to calculate A minus B plus C. Then I know that I need these variables. And that means I got to start looking for cells that have those variables. And I'm just going to attach some names here. So this is cell one, this is cell two, Roman numerals. This is cell three, right? Four. What I could do is I could say, like, this is kind of like a DAG. I have cell four, and in order for that to run, I need this cell to be around, I need this other cell to be around, and I need this other cell to be around. And basically, before anything runs inside of Marimo, there's this pass over all the code where we try to figure out in what order the cells have to run. Because if we know it up front, then we can also do some clever things. We can say things like, oh, let's say the DAG was a bit more complex. Let's say there's a node over here as well, maybe another one over here. Then we could do things like, hey, if I make a change to this one cell over here, then these cells over here don't have to run again. We can kind of be a bit picky about that, and we can save some compute. And one interesting consequence of this is that it's also fully reactive. So I can change this one cell over here, and then the rest can just automatically update without me manually having to run the cells. Now, to be clear, you don't always want that. Because if we're dealing with a big compute thing like giant PyTorch loop or big data frame operation, then you actually want to have manual control. So what you can do is at the bottom over here, we have this on cell change auto run. You can change that to become lazy. And then if you were to make a change to a cell and maybe run that, then you can see the color of the cell changes to indicate that this cell needs to be manually fired off because because it's dependent on a cell that just changed. And this way you can manually change all the cells if you want to.
What does the on module change mean? What
On
does that
module
trigger?
chain?
Yeah.
Oh, if I have like a Python file locally that's like a module that I'm building or like a package that I'm working on and I'm importing that inside of this notebook.
Okay, it watches the import.
Yeah.
Got it.
And then sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. But we basically give you control here. And the whole like the main use case I gotta say for this really is the whole oh, I have like this one cell that's like a big heavy compute thing. I don't want that to automatically trigger all the time. And maybe for some workloads, it's actually a lot better to just do that stuff manually. That's mainly what the setting is for. Um, but one cheeky thing that's kind of interesting at this point, like if we understand that we do this forward pass over all the cells and we try to figure out what order things have to run, there is this other thing that we could do. We could also introduce some UI elements. So I could say something like, oh, there's a slider here. So it's like starting value and let's steps of one, something like that, right? I can introduce a slider. So that thing can slide around. And I can now say, oh, that value B over there, that's equal to the value of that slider. And now as I move the slider around, we can also see that this value over here updates. And if you squint your eyes, you'll notice something over here change. When I hover over, you can see how long each cell took to run. But as I move the slide around, you can also kind of see the order of things. So when I trigger this cell will update. Afterwards, this cell will update. So this whole reactive thing is basically happening on your behalf. And this is kind of special, right? Like the fact that these cells can run automatically, that is definitely not something that I was used to from the Jupyter way of thinking about notebooks. But this
Mm.
is, if you think about what makes Marimo special, a lot of it really does boil down to this. The fact that we do this forward pass, that we figure out the DAG. It's a kind of a nifty UI here. Is like explore dependencies, and like there's lots of cells in this notebook, so it's kind of big, right? But you actually have a map of like all the cells and what stuff depends on the cells and where we do the import. So you could also explore that if you wanted to.
I see. I have a lot of questions, but I don't want to
Well,
take you off
this
track.
might actually, so this might be a good time to ask them actually, because I'm going to go into an example after.
Okay.
Because I did saw you tweet
It,
this one time that there's a consequence that you're not allowed to do this. So you have some library, MoHTML, you can't do this. And I remember you tweeting about this,
yeah,
right?
yeah, that
Yeah,
one caught me pretty,
yeah.
but I think that's a okay compromise. I mean, it makes
Well,
sense.
there's a reason for it, namely that this A is a global, and that makes it easy for us to figure out like, oh, everything's kind of global, it's explicitly defined, and therefore we can define the order of the cells. But there's also like another thing that trips people. You also can't do this
Hmm.
because what's the value of A in this cell? Do we have to assume that all of these updates happened? Or is this meant to be running after? So in-place variable updates is something that we actually prefer you not do because it makes it very hard for us to figure out what the order of the cells are. There is a benefit to this though, and this is something that definitely bit me a few times inside of Jupyter. What would happen if I were to remove this A variable, the declaration, right? If I were now to run this cell, an error is going to happen immediately because the representation of the cell has to also be equal to the representation in memory. And that's the thing with Jupyter that can catch a lot of people by surprise. If you accidentally delete a cell, that doesn't mean that the variable has been removed from memory, if that makes sense. So this is also a enforcement mechanism for consistency, if that makes sense.
I see.
I kind of interrupted you because usually these two facts are the one thing that sort of uh, confuse people the most. But like now that I'm done talking, let it rip. What are your questions?
Yeah, tell me more about the AI coding feature. Can it see all the cells? Can it see the
Yes.
markdown cells? Can it see everything? What does it see? Does it see only the
So
cells before it? Does it see after it? Can you tell us like more? It's very
yeah,
interesting.
so we have all the variables, right? So these are defined. So these are like variables. We have them in sight. We also have these data sources. I've only gotten data frames here, but you can like hook up Postgres or Iceberg or Redshift. That one's new.
Hmm.
That one was added last week. But data's like so we've got variables, but then data frames or tables are kind of like special citizens. And one thing you can do is you can also chat with AI. So I could do something like, hey, what are the columns in, I think I called it chick data frame. Yeah. So it's an in-memory data frame. You can just detect that.
Hmm.
Um, and this gives us a way to say, oh, there's a data frame there. There's a schema attached to it. Let's add that to the prompt. And this is using Claude for Sonnet. And yeah, it can see, like it's able to inspect some of that schema information basically. And on our end, what we do is we basically make the prompt a bit bigger. We're able to inject like some knowledge that might be useful. That's something that we can do here. Like a couple of output things happen here. You can add that to the notebook or you can copy it. There is also a Copilot feature you can turn on if you wanted to. And another thing that's also good to know, if you go to, there's an AI section over here where you can add your keys and all that. But one thing you can also do is like add custom rules. And basically, I prefer polars over pandas these days. And whenever I make charts, I really like to do that with Altair. And this is just going to be appended to every prompt that you send out to an LLM.
In
And
the does the Copilot in the notebook see all the cells in the markdown? Like if you wanted to just stay
I
in the notebook
think
and not go to chat, let's say.
I would have to do a little bit of a rain check. Yeah, okay. I don't feel like doing this right now. So I think the tab completion thing that we've got, that only looks in the current. I don't know for sure actually. I don't know if the so we have two settings there. So one thing I could do is Shift Command E. There is this generate with AI element that we've got here, and this one definitely works only on this one cell, I think, but I could be wrong on that. I would have to check. I need to check the code for that, to be
Mm,
honest. I do
okay,
know for sure that this one actually looks at the entire notebook, and you're able to explicitly pass on schemas.
got it.
Um, I don't know for sure about the tab. Like this is like GitHub Copilot tab completion stuff that you can get within a cell. I just don't know for sure if we how much we look outside of the cell. That's something I prefer to be right than wrong, so I'm not going to answer that question
No
right
worries, no worries. I understand. Can you tell me more about the storage format of the Marimo notebook? Like, how is it stored, and
now.
then
It is
how
a Python
you?
file.
Okay.
So one benefit of having a Python file is the Git story is just a kind of a bit nicer. Like it's a Python file, so you don't have to worry about the JSON stuff. Another thing is that you've got the cool UV benefits. So any benefit that happens to like normal Python files, we also get. So you can add this. I think it's like it's a PEP, so pip can also deal with this, but you can add this basically to the start of your file. You can say what version of Python it needs and what dependencies we want, and this makes the notebook pretty much self-contained. Like you can run this in a sandbox command. You do Marimo run sandbox or Marimo edit sandbox, and it can just install the dependencies right on the fly. The thing that's interesting, if you look at the cells, you can actually see that this is a cell that needs a couple of variables, and you can also see sometimes that a cell returns a variable. And this
Hmm.
is basically the reactive graph thing in action as well. So whenever you make an edit and we save it, we have a decorated function where, oh, this cell needs polars around. Oh, and this cell emits a chicken data frame. And every time we decorate one of these functions, we check like what's the input signature, what's the output signature, and that way we can also construct the order in which all these functions have to run. Another benefit of having it in a Python file like this is it's kind of like a fast API app, right? So we decorate everything, and there's like we've also got SQL cells, by the way, and Markdown cells, and like we've got a lot of stuff. But at the end, you are able to do if name equals dunder main app run. So you could also choose to run this notebook by saying, look, just Python name of notebook file, and it'll just run as a Python script. So what you could theoretically do is you could like, I don't know if you like, I prefer Typer, but you can also define a click app in here. And then your notebook can also have a self-contained command line application that is still in a Python file. So you can also use Marimo inside a CI if you really wanted to.
Um, what happens to the outputs? Like, let's say visualization, something like that. Let's say you work on
So
a
we don't
notebook.
store them. That's the short
Okay.
story. We don't store them, but what you can, of course, do is we do have you can download this stuff as Markdown or as HTML. So if you have static outputs, that can definitely be nicely stored. Another thing you could also do is we have Pyodide nowadays. So what you could theoretically do is the outputs are still not stored, but you could also say, well, assuming you don't have any weird Rust dependencies in here that Pyodide can't handle, you can also export this notebook to a static HTML file, which you can then host on GitHub Pages. So for lots of my new packages, I basically host this notebook on GitHub Pages, and that can also be like an export target if you want.
If you export a Marimo notebook to, like, let's say you have a report that you made, all kinds of visualizations and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you investigated some data, you want to send it to your colleagues. Um, you know,
Just going to open up a example.
do you
So
have
I
to export to HTML? Is there any way to send them the notebook with everything in it without them having to rerun it to get the same visualizations?
if I'm not mistaken, yeah, that is from we need to run that from the command line. Like we have an export command. I think you could also let's just grab terminal. Yeah, Marimo export. Let's just grab the help. Yeah, so you could run it like HTML would kind of be the safe bet. It just depend if you want to export an altair chart, for example, that'll be fine because you get everything that's just a static HTML file with some JavaScript and it's self-contained. But if you need to run some Python code in order to also update the chart because you're connecting to some sort of API or whatever, then you can hook it up to this WASM backend. But that's because you need some live Python to also run. You could also choose to export it to a Jupyter file if you really wanted to. We also support the IPython notebook, and then you can render that as you would normally too if you really wanted to do that.
Okay. And can you go in the reverse direction? Like, you can import can you import HTML into this, like, HTML notebook into Marimo, or
Well,
IPyND
so
into
this is
Marimo, or how do you
so we
interchange?
I would have to double check. So like the main thing with Jupyter that you have to be a little bit careful with, right? It could theoretically be that you have A equals in like multiple cells, and that's something we don't technically support. So you will always have that, right? So that's something to be kind of aware of. Um, but in general, the main idea behind this format is we don't store the actual outputs. You can do that by doing some sort of an export, but the main benefit of doing it this way is just the whole Git story is just so much nicer. That's I think the main reason why Akshay, the creator, um, went with this style. I could be wrong on the history details there, but I think Akshay is actually in the YouTube maybe as well, so he can give details. Um,
He's not in the Zoom, but yeah, maybe he's in the YouTube.
Oh yeah, Marimo. Oh, there you go.
Oh, yes.
There's also a setting to automatically snapshot the notebook as IPython HTML as it runs. Akshay, he's in the YouTube.
Sorry, what did he say? There's options to.
There's also a setting to automatically snapshot the notebook as you run. So let's see if I can find that. So there might be like a setting here, like a user setting. When enabled, Marimo. Oh, here you go. When enabled, Marimo will periodically save this notebook in your selected format, HTML IPython notebook, to a folder underscore Marimo next to your notebook file. So if I select this and then hit save, and if I then go here, then yeah, we see the bulk HTML appear. So this is the HTML that contains everything. So there is a setting that allows you to, as you are working. Oh, right. And then this is also an interesting thing. I need to install this dependency in order to also store the IPython notebook. Let's just have that install. There's a packages tab. That's also kind of like good to mention. So you don't have to do the annoying exclamation point pip install package name thing. Like we've got a dedicated sidebar that allows you to install packages. And also, if I'm not mistaken, if I were to do something like import sklearn or I don't know, some other like torch, if I were to do that, right? Is that also around? Okay, Flask. Yeah. Whenever we see an import that isn't in the virtual environment, we can automatically detect that and we can immediately add it to the virtual environment. So that's actually something that just happened. Let's just save now, double check the user settings. Okay, it should now save this as an IPython notebook. The dependencies are now installed. And if I were to now check here, we see that bulk.ipynb got saved. Yeah, and no renderer could be found for this MIME type. I think that's a VS Code thing, but the charts I do think would appear here if you were to add this to GitHub, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong. But I would imagine that anything that you do get the Marimo slider stuff that won't render, of course, right? But I think if you were to add static matplotlib stuff here, it would be attached to the notebook. I think we can open this, open with, and then we can say as a text. Yeah, so the outputs are stored here, right? So that's something you can see. So if you really did want to store your like visual artifacts, you could. But Marimo chooses to just kind of forgo that and have a clean Python file instead. That's the main vibe, at least, that I would describe it.
Okay, great. Yeah, that was really helpful to get that.
Like it is different. So the main thing is it is different than Jupyter, but for me at least, the main thing that kind of took me by surprise is the fact that like, oh, it's the reactive nature and things can automatically run, and that has consequences. But the moment that you grok that, you can kind of infer how everything else is supposed to run. But it is very much unlike Jupyter. If I were to like, from my experience, the main thing that I miss from Jupyter, that I did think was kind of neat, is you know how you could be inside of a cell and outside of it.
Mm-hmm.
Those shortcuts just kind of work differently because there's not really a notion of being inside of a cell or outside of it. A good consequence of that is that I do get these columns, but because we don't necessarily have like a first cell and a last cell because it's all kind of a DAG, that's also why a lot of these keyboard shortcuts that you're used to, that's also going to be just fairly different. Like that's the main like that's the first half hour. Oh, my fingers don't find the right shortcuts anymore. That's the main pain point that I experienced when I tried it the first time.
What do you mean? I'm not sure I track the inside. I mean, I understand you're inside a cell and outside a cell, but I'm not sure. It seems like you're inside a cell right now. You're inside that first cell.
Oh, yeah, yeah, but usually, if this were Jupyter, right, I could hit escape, and then I'd be kind of outside of a cell,
Yeah.
and then you will be able to go through all the different cells. Let me put it this way. That was a shortcut that I used all over the place back when I used
Okay.
Jupyter for like quick navigation, basically.
I see.
Um, one thing, we also have a command palette. So like one thing you could do is you could go for like show the keyboard shortcuts. And then like all these shortcuts are things that you can also manually change. But these shortcuts are like pretty different from Jupyter, basically because the way that cells interact is also very different from Jupyter. So this is the main sort of productivity hump to get over, I might say.
Okay.
So, okay. Having said all of this, like I've
So
explained,
is your
yeah.
main like the the reason that you personally like Marimo, is there a certain feature that kind of, takes up most of your, I mean, is there a certain like flagship feature? Is it the reactivity or is it just like a whole bunch of them together? You
It
know,
is definitely so you've got these reasons that pull you in, and then there's like the holistic picture that makes you stay. That's kind of the way that I would experience it. So for me, the AI thing on its own would not be a reason for me to start using Marimo. The way it does package management on its own would also not be the reason for me to use Marimo. The UI elements also for me, they're interesting reasons for me to try them, but it's not for me to stick around. However, when you add all of them together and when it's kind of becomes a holistic ball, then suddenly I become super duper productive. And I think the main moment for me at my previous employer, I was doing a live stream and I hit a bug during the live stream that was caused by I deleted a variable that was kept in memory. I had a cell that still had that variable around, but it wasn't representative of what was in memory, or like something along those lines. That will just never happen in Marimo. Like there will be a big red error in my face whenever a moment like that would occur. So like there was this one time when Marimo actually corrected me live. And that was a moment for me where I did start to think like, okay, this is nice. Like I like tools that correct me while I'm in the flow of it, and not like 5 minutes after when I'm trying to debug something.
that makes sense. I can see already for teaching is kind of interesting. I already really, I mean, the column thing is really good. Um,
Yes,
for
yes.
this like what you're doing right now, which is like teaching us.
And let me give you another thing that's great for teaching then, since I have you. But before getting there, I'm gonna have to explain a little bit of theory because I'm about to show you like a pretty complex visualization with like a couple of steps in it. It's a trick that I've used over and over again in the past, but let's say you've got a big data set. Like this is a picture of a database, and we have lots of texts in there. And let's for keeping things simple, let's say that this is a customer support data, right? It could be that we are interested in a very specific phenomenon. Maybe we're interested in things like, oh, customers might be complaining about deliveries or something like that, right? And one thing I could do is I could type the word delivery and I could do like a basic text search, and that wouldn't be a bad idea. But there's a lot of these like delivery adjacent words and things, right? So instead, what you might want to do is maybe do something with vectors instead. So one thing you could do is you could kind of build the very standard vector lookup thing. You take every single text, turn it into an n-dimensional vector, and then you could sort of do the lookup. But the thing that I usually really like to do instead is I like to turn that high dimensional array into like a low dimensional array, preferably two-dimensional. And then I like to turn that into like one of these big scatter charts with UMAP, basically. It's a trick that I think people have seen before, right? If you take lots of these texts that have clusters in them, if you pass them through UMAP after doing some sort of a embedding, then you tend to get this 2D chart where there's just lots and lots of different clusters, basically. And if I'm then like one thing that can
And
happen
just to
then is if
clarify,
I
UMAP is a clustering algorithm.
it's a dimensionality reduction technique. It is
Oh, dimensionality reduction. Okay, it's been a
yeah,
while since I've.
yeah. So it's the main thing to think about it. The main way that I like to think about it is PCA is really good at keeping the global structure intact, but that does come at the cost of local structure. Like it's kind of hard to find clusters when you do PCA. But then what UMAP does is it basically says, oh, but all the clusters that were there in the high dimensional space, they persist in the low dimensional space. It's just that distance between clusters no longer means anything. That's kind of the balance, if I were to put it into words. But the thing that I'm about to show you is I'm about to show you a system where I can type a query, and that is going to determine the colors that appear in this chart. And that I'm going to show you how that will just help me find data points that I'm interested in maybe annotating. And this is also like a perfect example of something that would be super hard to do if we didn't have something that was like properly reactive. So like one thing I could do is like this is the Altair chart that's decorated with
Now this looks so familiar now. I feel like you've been working on this
yes.
derivative of this specific thing for a while. Even before Marimo, I've seen you hack around in this
So
area.
I spent years building like standalone web apps and like Jupyter plugins even to get this workflow to work nicely for me because it's a very powerful workflow. Like you solve a lot of problems if you do it this way. But if you have reactivity, it's just done. So what Marimo can do is it can, if I just show the code, it's kind of a cool trick. So you can give it a scatter chart from Altair, and Marimo can turn that into a selector widget. What does that mean? Well, what I'm able to do is I'm able to make like a selection here. Like I'm able to select these data points. And then this widget has a value property. And I can just look at what I just selected, basically. And maybe I should zoom out to really show that. I can select a different region here. And then the data frame down below here updates. So what I'm actually able to do is like kind of look around this embedded space. Something over here. What's this? This is all about online grocery items. Stuff I see over here is about club cards. So there's like clusters over here, right? And the fact that I'm able to make a selection and get an impression of what the cluster is about, that's definitely kind of nice and useful. But what I can also do is say something like, oh, I'm interested in like, I don't know, club card. And when this cell updates, this cell can update, which means that I can now make a selection. And lo and behold, this cell can now also update. But there's something about that interactivity where I'm
So
able
is
to
it
just kind of.
stacking that filter kind of like you have that query?
So this is just to change the color of the dots. That's the
Oh, the
only thing
color.
that this
Okay.
does.
I see.
But the reason why I do that, there's a good reason for it, is sometimes two clusters light up at the same time. And that's interesting. Like, again, I don't want to stare at my data. I want to interact with it. I want to actually look at it. I want to understand what clusters exist. And there's an interesting thing, like you have club cards, but if I were to go to like delivery, that's also a common theme. Oh, that's a lot bigger, for example. And just like being able to spot that and see that, oh, there's actually way more complaints about like deliveries than about like club cards. Just doing a basic vector lookup and then looking at some of those results wouldn't give you this extra information, right? And it's super easy for me to just whip this together inside of a Marimo notebook. So there's a ton of these like visual packages that I've made that I'm just not going to be maintaining going forward because they'll just become a widget inside of a Marimo notebook, and we don't need the complex web app around that anymore. And again, why does that work? Well, we have reactivity. So
Nice.
that's like that feeling, like it's not necessarily upgrading the notebook. I'm kind of more upgrading my imagination. That's the thing that's making me stick. Like I kind of know that I can get quite creative with the stuff that I want to do. And again, it's just nice and reactive, and it's just super nice. Any questions about this
Can you
before I
sc-
move on?
can you scroll down a little bit? I just want to
Yeah.
remind myself how you okay, so you have the plot. So you have an Altair plot
Yeah. So
that
so
you
going through the steps, step one is query goes in. Then I've got an Altair chart over here, the colors update. Then I can make a selection over here. And whenever I make a selection, this data, like the widget that I declare here that has a value property, that's a data frame, and there's a text column. That's what you see over here. So so the step is change the color, make a selection. I can also pan around, by the way. I can make different selections, but every time I make a selection over here, basically this other cell will update as a reaction.
can you show that part where you link the Altair chart to the, you know,
So it's
yeah,
really this.
okay.
So this is the Altair chart. There is this little magic thing that we have around that. So there's a couple of libraries. Altair is one. We also do the same thing for Plotly. You give it an Altair chart, and Altair has this selector element, but it never really had a way to give that back to Python. So what Marimo is able to do is it is able to say like, look, this is still an Altair chart, but you're also able to make selections. And when you do, we have a widget over here. That widget has a property called value. So widget dot value, and that is just this one data frame. And that's basically just selecting the data. This is just a subset of the subset of the entire data frame. That's what's being selected, and that's something I have over here as a value. But this cell knows if I want to display this, this widget is a thing that I need. So then this cell goes, I have declared widget. But then this cell says, but if I want to be able to declare widget, I need to have this variable plotter. And then I think I've got a cell somewhere, I don't know where, maybe down below over here. Yeah, plotter. And if I want to have plotter, what do I need? Well, you are going to want to have this transformed X thing. And eventually it says, oh, I need this query over here. So it's
No, that's interesting. Did you run that cell that was all the way down there, or does that matter? Like what?
it runs automatically. So I
Okay,
don't have to worry about that. That's the whole point of Marimo.
I see.
Marimo looks at the variables in the cells, and just by looking at that, it can kind of um, it doesn't do this at runtime. It does it before running all the code. But the whole point really is, oh, I know what variables this cell needs. Let's look for the parent. Let's keep on looking for the parent. Okay, we've mapped everything. Okay, now we can run everything once. Oh, a cell over here changes. Okay, what children do I gotta update? That is all handled for you.
Okay, because like in a Jupyter notebook, yeah, you definitely would have to
You would
run
have to
that.
scroll up and down, run a few cells. I've been told there is actually a plugin nowadays that can do some of that stuff. And if you build your own widgets with the IPython widget library, there's a couple of party tricks you can definitely do. But this is just so much more intuitive. Like this is I don't have to think about it kind of a feeling.
And I see you've nerd sniped a lot of people already with this fast HTML. I'm not gonna spoil it, but I see that you are teasing it in the next column.
People have spotted that, have they? Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay.
uh, I'm talking to you. I'm assuming the fast HTML crowd's going to show up. I better come prepared, right? Like to do the homework. Um, but anyway, like this on its own is kind of a cool demo. Like already, I like to think like, okay, this is pretty useful. This is also good for qualitatively understanding what this data set is about, basically, right? That's cool. But why stop here? Like, if I were to now think like what's actually useful to do, like let's say, okay, we know that we are interested in getting some complaints about deliveries. If I make this selection, sure, some of them are going to be about deliveries, but some of them won't be. But these examples over here are like quite proximate to examples that are about deliveries, maybe, right? It kind of feels like we got to do some annotation here. If you want to turn this into a classification problem or something like that, right? Then maybe a good next step will be just labeling.
Mm.
That's where this little guy's going to come in immediately because there is a standard nowadays, and it's a really cool project. It's called Any Widget. Um, Any Widget solves the problem of building a widget that will work in Jupyter and in Colab and in Marimo and like all those different notebook environments. And Any Widget is just kind of the standard that everyone else can wrap around. And this is a thing that allows you to make a widget, basically. So Jupyter also has like a widget library, and the way that Jupyter handles it was always a little bit different than Colab, which is always a bit different than VS Code. The whole point of this library is that there's one standard that everyone can kind of just adhere to. It has a small surface area, but what it does allow you to do is build custom widgets for yourself inside of your notebook.
And who maintains? Is this a Marimo project or is it a third party or who?
So
What's the background of it?
there's this guy called Trevor. I used to host a podcast for my previous employer. Trevor was the first guest. Trevor Mance. He did a PhD, kind of revolving around widgets like this, a bit more in the biomedical space, if I recall correctly. He is a direct colleague of mine, but it deserves to be stressed. Any widget is like all notebooks, and that's not going to change. So yes, Trevor's working with me and my colleagues, and we're definitely eager to invest in Any Widget. But Any Widget itself will never be Marimo specific. This is across all the notebooks, basically. So if you build an Any Widget for Marimo, it should also work in Jupyter. That's the way to think about it. However,
Okay.
the one thing I do want to mention is that the reactive nature of Marimo really lends itself well for Any Widgets, as you might be able to imagine, because what these widgets are able to do is you're actually able to change something on the JavaScript side of things and then see that reflected in your notebook. And maybe the best example of that, I'm just going to maybe do something down below over here. This wasn't part of the original demo, but I might as well show it. I made this Any Widget library called Draw Data. So from Draw Data, I'm going to import a scatter widget. Let's just zoom in a smidge. Yeah, and then Draw Data needs to be installed. So let's install that. It's installed, good. And now I should be able to do scatter widget. Wrap that with the Marimo Any Widget wrapper. And then this is a scatter thing. And then I should be able to just show you what the scatter widget looks like. So this is a tool that allows you to literally draw a data set. And this is amazing for teaching because you can literally draw a data set as you see fit. And the cool thing with that scatter widget is you can actually data as pandas, if I recall correctly. Yeah, so it can come out as a pandas data frame. And every time I draw, more rows are being added to the data frame. So that's super neat. But what you're seeing here is I'm doing something in JavaScript land, and somehow that finds its way back into Python.
So did you define this widget with Python or JavaScript?
Both.
Okay.
So if you look at the Any Widget example on the main docs, I think it does a really good, it does a good job of explaining it. But let me just, can I zoom in? Yeah, this zoom in and change the color. Notice, by the way, that I'm doing the doodling thing again. Everyone, buy the drawing tablet. It is amazing. So this is how you would define an Any Widget. You have to import these two libraries. One of them is called Any Widget. The other one is called Traitlets. Traitlets can be seen as a library that is able to bind variables such that JavaScript and Python can sort of communicate. And then there's this one value that I attach to this object. And then this is the basically ESM JavaScript string that has this one function called render. It needs to accept a model. The model represents all the variables that you declare from Python and that are shared between the JavaScript side of things and Python. And this element is basically the DOM element that it needs to attach onto. So in order to write these, you are going to benefit a lot from being able to do a bit of JavaScript. But what you can also do is have someone like Vincent who actually doesn't mind writing JavaScript, and I will build these widgets for you, such that you can just use Python inside of a notebook that you like, and you can still benefit from like having this interactivity as part of your workflow, basically. But the way it works, it's actually not that intimidating. So if I just go over like all the things that are listed here, right? So, okay, what's the first thing that happens inside of the JavaScript thing? Well, we declare a function where we're able to get the value, which is this traitlet that we've defined inside of Python. After that, we're going to create a button element. We're going to say, hey, there's a count attached there. We're going to add an event afterwards. Like whenever we do something in JavaScript, that's what this event here does. But we also have something clever here where we say like, oh, if ever the value changes from the Python side, this is how the JavaScript should respond. And that's about it. So it's basically what should happen if JavaScript makes a change to Python, what should happen if Python makes a change for JavaScript, and then you've got a button that has state, and that's the way it works.
Cool.
Any widget is the bee's knees. Again, just like the drawing tablet, I don't understand why I'm the only guy making these widgets. There's a small crowd of people actually building these widgets. It's a cool Discord, by the way. Like, do definitely join.
And does it only work? Is it only appropriate for, notebooks, or can you put it in your web app in just the
Yeah,
same
so
way? Or
it's nah. So I mean, Trevor would know the fine details there, but it's a different interop basically. Because Jupyter has like a certain way that it expects variables to just kind of be there, and it's I've not tried getting it to work inside of a proper web app. I I'm 99% certain it's going to be a painful journey, and it's going to be way easier to just use something like fast HTML instead if you want to have this kind of interactivity on like a normal website. But the goal here really is to give you features for your notebook experience also. So it's kind of it's not the target, I think, for the project. Again, if Trevor is watching, he can confirm. But my impression is that this is really just meant as a tool for you to build tools inside of your notebook. Fun fact, though, there are actually a couple of very popular libraries that actually use this under the hood now. And if you go to the community tab, Altair actually uses this under the hood, which is like a thing that not everyone knows about. There are also these other libraries, more to do with like Mosaic. There's also some like physics things in here, by the way. But there are like PyOpsplot is also like a really cool plotting library, by the way. But there's like a small community, and there's definitely like very cool widgets for sure. But it's kind of one of these libraries that are meant for package makers, so it's not that wildly known amongst the user group, if that makes sense.
yeah.
But it is a super cool project, and if you're interested in learning JavaScript, this is probably the most fun you'll get, like building your own widgets. If people are interested in talking to me afterwards, I am actually doing a bit of prompt engineering right now to see if we can get these widgets automatically generated on the fly. Like the dream that I've got is that in a couple of months, you'll be able to go into Marimo, right? And you'll be able to sort of start typing here, something like, hey, build me this widget because I want to do this kind of research. And the widget will just be generated for you inside of the notebook.
So what's the DevX of that widget building experience since you are writing JavaScript inside a string? Like,
Oh, you
do
can
you
also
have
have it in a
to?
you can also have it in a file, and
Oh,
then
okay.
you can just say like, hey, there's a static folder here, Python path library, open that file, put the string in here. That you can also do.
Is it a nice way to debug and let's say kind of play with it like really quickly when you're writing the JavaScript? You know?
I mean, the main to me, it all became easier when I learned of this one shortcut, Shift Command C, because what you're able to do is you're able to click an element, click, and then DevTools will immediately bring you to that one element that you're interested in debugging. Like it's the annoying thing was figuring out like how do I select that one element inside of a Jupyter notebook and I don't want to click around here forever. That used to be the painful bit, but then once I got that figured out, it was pretty good. I will say you can also get quite far with vibe coding those kinds of things. It's just that if you want to debug it, it does help if you've done like D3 before, let's say.
Oh my goodness, D3. Okay.
Yeah, no,
That
I like
that
that
one
thing.
is
So
a steep learning curve, yes.
it is, but at the same time, it was also the reason that I started to learn programming. Without that library, I probably would have never picked it up.
Yeah, it is super cool, no doubt.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Um, so but like one observation I do want to maybe make here is like, hey, this is kind of interesting. Like when we're talking about interactivity, Marimo comes with widgets, but nothing is stopping you from making your own. And the way that I've set up this notebook is what I can do is I can actually maybe make a selection over here. This is something that I might want to annotate. And then here we are to the widget that I sort of want to really highlight here. This is an annotation widget. There are lots of ways to annotate data. Sometimes you want to make selections in an image. Sometimes you want to make selections for spans in text. Like there's lots of different ways to do it. But 9 times out of 10, you can boil it down to yes, no, and skip. Like it's kind of a binary situation that you can often boil it down to because sometimes there's a classification. Can I apply this label? Yes, no. Sometimes it's, oh, there's these two variations. Which ones do I like best? Sometimes it's, oh, I'm doing retrieval. Is this example a good thing that fits this query? Like, so the way that this thing is set up is basically you have to generate a card here in the middle, and then you can say yes, no, or skip, and you can also go back if you wanted to. The way that you generate this is up to you. The only thing you got to do is give me a string that really looks like it's HTML that I can render in here. So if you want to use fast HTML for that, totally be my guest. But the thing you got to do is you got to give it a list of examples and a function that knows how to render each example in here. Then I can render that in the middle, and the widget around it will from there provide you keyboard shortcuts, which will also be displayed. And I've also built it in such a way that the gamepad API is also supported. And the thing that I'm then able to do is I'm able to sort of click around and say like, yes, no, yes, no. I'm able to go back as well. But the really cool thing is sometimes you also want to add context. And if you're using Chrome, Chrome has a web API for speech detection and it's free. So what I'm also able to do is hit this button and then I can start talking. And then, oh, this is now a note that will be attached to this one annotation. And I'm done talking now and I can go to maybe next. And if I were to go previous, I can see the note again and I can sort of, there's lots of these examples I can imagine, like, especially in LLM land where, oh, the bot made a mistake here. But for downstream tasks, I got to explain why this is a specific kind of mistake, right? So for that use case, I also make it easy for you to just add a note. If you look at the annotations at the bottom here,
So can I ask you a
um,
question about this annotation
yeah,
interface?
sure.
What part of this annotation widget, this card, I guess,
Yeah,
with the buttons, like, is that all defined in fast HTML or
up to you.
what
Up to
in
you.
this demo,
The
what
render,
did fast
the render,
HTML was
this
do?
render
Yeah.
function. So this render function is fast HTML. So I wrote kind of my own thing called Mo HTML. It does a few things that I like, but any like you can also use Jinja. I don't really care. I will say fast HTML does lend itself very nicely for this though. But you have a example that goes in, um, and what I want to render is some sort of span on top that tells the user what the label is, what the task is, basically. And then at the bottom, I have this example text that I just want to show, and there's like a couple of Tailwind classes that I attach. But the way that you render this, it has to be a function, and it's up to you to choose what you like. But fast HTML does lend itself very nicely for this. especially because I think Isaac is in here. He made Monster UI, and there's like a couple of these packages that come with nice UI elements. Those can just be dunked in here and they just work.
Can you scroll up again? I'm trying to just locate where this label appropriate thing is and the other text
Sure.
in the UI.
Yeah, so let's first start here. So we've got those examples, right?
Yeah.
So, and let me like, maybe start there. And again, let's just look at the first
Oh, I see
10.
it now. It's part of that. Okay, I see it's underlined and it has the. But
Yeah, so the
so okay, that text part is basically your that's the renderer, and then all the buttons and stuff are kind of your widget that you already made that we plug into.
yeah, so the thing the thing that I've built around it is whoops. The thing that I built around it is this progress bar, these buttons, the notes thing at the bottom, and it's up to you to populate this with something meaningful.
I see.
And how do we do that? Well, you supply a function that can do it. And as far as I'm concerned, fast HTML lends itself quite well for that. Mo
No, I
HTML
really
does as
like
well.
this. This is like a really good trade-off. Or this is
It,
like
it,
a
it
kind of a good design pattern. This is, I think you would have to be really annotating a lot of data to know, but
I mean,
I think this is like
I've
really
built
good.
annotation software
Yeah.
before, so it's not my first foregone at it. But the main thing that I like, all the things that you just said are true, but there's like this one extra thing I want to add here. You can still do Python around it. So if you want to do deduplication up front, send it to a specific database, do user stuff, you're in a notebook and you're free to do whatever. That's the thing that I really like about this approach mostly. Like, sure, the UI is kind of like nice and all that, and the gamepad is awesome. But the main thing that's just really nice is it doesn't get in the way. You just add a widget to your notebook, and oh, it's pretty fun to just get started annotating, and you can be done in 10 minutes. And in an hour, you have 500 examples. I don't know how fast people like to annotate, but it doesn't break your flow. That's the main thing I like about this thing. You don't have to start up a new app. You can just sort of add a widget, and your notebook can now also annotate data. And
Yeah.
again, what I really want to get at here is I'm trying to get people to stop staring at their data and to start really looking at it. And the best way for me to do that is to make it fun and easy. And I like to think that this is indeed a very nice balance. The thing I made earlier, by the way, like this is I think a widget that combines a few elements. Um, the speech to text thing, there's also a library called MoTalk that just has a widget that only does speech to text. There's this other widget called MoPad that is doing the gamepad stuff. Like there's also widgets just for that. But don't sleep on these widgets in general. Like other things that you could do. I don't know if people played around with the Gemini API, but the Gemini API actually allows for drawings and like images and stuff. So I made this paint widget. But this paint widget is actually like pretty dang neat. Like if you want to like, demo that I've done that you can do yourself as well, especially if you have a drawing tablet like this, you can actually draw uh, a DAG like this and then tell Gemini like, hey, what's the JSON for this? And it will just go ahead and give it to you. I'm building another tool like this built on TL Draw, which has like proper vector images. And you can draw proper diagrams in that and then hand it off to Gemini, and they can actually do mechanical engineering tasks for you. And again, like why stop there? We can paint, but what we can also do, if you're into like PyTorch and stuff, I can also come up with widgets for like charts that live update. So I can have a cell over here that has a chart, and I can have another cell that updates that chart in line because I can change the state of the widget. And that's something you can now totally also have in your notebook. You can have these cells that sort of asynchronously update as while some training is happening. And on top of that, and that's kind of I think a nice place to maybe end as well. Uh,
Hey,
I
one
think
question.
yeah.
Those annotations,
Oh yeah,
how do
yeah,
you
yeah. Okay.
save them? Do you like, do you do that? Yeah, like where do you
Up to
trigger that?
you.
Yeah.
So up to you. So like one thing, as I annotate, right, this cell over here updates, and there's a list of items. You can write some logic here that says every time, I don't know, I get like I have like 10 annotations or maybe 20 and then 30, etc. Then I'm going to send the request to some backend to store it in the server. You can also write a little bit of SQL alchemy here if you really wanted to. That's kind of up to you. You can store it
Um,
into a file as well. Like it depends on that sort of stuff usually depends on what you like to do as a team, but you can write Python around that to take care of it.
okay, it's this label widget get annotations. What is the event that triggers that to run?
So this thing triggers every time you make an annotation. So you could store every single thing that goes in. You can also choose to batch this.
Okay, and you can
Yeah,
and
so you
you
could do
like,
something like if length of this thing mod 10, right? Then the cell will still run every single time, but it's not going to cause an event to happen downstream. If you were to like add a mod here, like you could do
okay.
stuff like this. But again, like this is like I remember working at this company, and then the community would ask us things like, "Oh, could you add support for MongoDB?" And like, "Oh, could you add support for Postgres?" And "Oh, could you add support for UnicornDB?" And like, you would kind of get like all these crazy requests of things you would like to add. So the main thing that I would recommend people do here is just write Python. You can figure
So
it out.
is there something like get annotation, but singular, like get and like, just gives you that one
Oh,
annotation?
just
That
the most recent one, you mean?
Yeah, you would just do it like this. Okay.
I mean, I made this thing like 2 days ago, so it's pretty fresh. You can definitely like use it for
No,
a bit
okay.
and then tell Vincent to maybe consider a feature, right? That's also something that can happen. Like the main thing I want to do here is like this is also me presenting this for the first time to the outside world. I'm also here eager to get feedback, right? So like if there's a preference to maybe only have the latest thing or like something like that, we can always add that to the library. That's definitely reasonable.
Got it. Okay. I
Um,
mean, this is like, it's not like, okay, this is not you saying this is our annotations or like our widgets library that we've, thought about for an extremely long time. This is like, hey, you can build whatever you want in Marimo and kind of look what I built. You built this thing for annotations and you can build something too if you
Yeah,
want.
I mean, it's kind of like Legos. That's the best explanation I would maybe put here. Like, Marimo defines how things can click together. And what I really like to do is come up with fancy new Lego bricks that you can maybe use, right? And a lot of it is because, oh, there's a new Gemini API. Oh, it does stuff with images. Oh, I need an image input. Oh, it doesn't exist yet. Okay, let's build one. So a lot of the stuff that I do, like I'm technically the first hire over at Marimo, so I am technically like a developer, although a lot of stuff that I do is a bit more based around growth. And the way that I like to maybe do that is I also do the YouTube thing, of course, but a lot of it is also just come up with widgets to see if this can actually serve a community. So right now I'm very much into the, data quality. That's definitely like my background. I want to make sure we got good widgets for that. Depending on what we got to focus on this summer, I don't know, maybe we do some stuff for maps, right? Like I can definitely see that kind of becoming a nice little thing to maybe work on. So we'll see like what has priority. We're a small team, but we ship like 3 releases a week, 4 if you include these widgets. Uh, but the thing that I'm trying to do is have like more widgets out there in the ecosystem. That's definitely kind of like the thing I really try to do over at Marimo, which is also like every month I tend to release 2 of these widgets.
Okay. There's been a lot of comments on the Zoom that you have a YouTube channel where you keep sharing different ways of using Marimo, and it's highly recommended. So
It
people
gets
should check that
compliments
out.
online, and we are not we try to if we make a video, we try to not be too hypey about it and make it worth your time. We only try to show stuff that's actually kind of useful. That's definitely a goal that we have in mind. But yes, definitely check us out. We also have a really good Discord, by the way. Feel free to check that out as well. Um, I do want to end on like a final thing, because that's something that people sometimes forget. Like a thing that you can also do just as a programmer, right? Let's make a class like, I don't know, foobar. I don't know. And we're going to initialize it just like you would normally, right? And I don't know, you would do like self.thing equals thing. Let's maybe add a thing in here. Fine. And then if I were to do something like foobar, this is what the representation looks like. And this comes from the era where we are doing things inside of a terminal. And that's fine. But for Pete's sakes, we're in a browser. We can do super awesome things in here. Like what one thing you could do is maybe consider doing some interactive HTML there. So like one trick that you can do that's Marimo specific is you can add this display method, right? And then I made this one library called mohtml. Like one thing that's kind of cool about it is you're able to do like, you can add some text in here. Hello. I could do like a class, font bold, if I'm not mistaken, right? If I were now to run this, oh, like I can display a rich HTML thing in here that kind of belongs nicely to this class. And the best
So
example of
there's
this
also
is,
the dunder
yeah,
like
there's
HTML thing and
yeah, so
or
there's this wrapper HTML is also something that exists.
yeah.
This will work across Jupyter and Marimo. The only thing, like the reason I bring the display up is because this is Marimo specific, but Jupyter does not look for this one, but we do. So if you want to make something as Marimo specific, this is the way to do it. This is also definitely something that you could do though. So if I were to,
What would you want to make something Marimo specific? Like, give us an example comes to mind.
so one thing that we've got, so mo app meta and then mode. Right. So this is something. So right now I have code that I can write that detects that right now this app is running in edit mode, right? But I can also run in app mode. Like I can drag, I need to zoom out here, but I can drag the outputs of cells into a dashboard if that makes sense. And this, in doing this, this is like the widget editor that Marimo gives you. So
Mm.
you can make these boxes smaller or bigger, but now you're running in app mode. Oh, maybe the way that you display something needs to be different if you're running it from edit mode or app mode, let's say. Okay, that distinction is like a
I
very
see.
Marimo
Okay.
specific thing, right? And there will always be things that are just really Marimo specific. So
Okay.
for that, we have our own little verb, but it should be
Makes sense.
stressed. Like 9 times out of 10, I would already be super happy if more people would just do this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, makes sense.
Like
That
you're in
that
a
makes
browser, like do
sense.
it, do something cool with it. Because if you do that, then you can, I don't know, maybe make a dice library where, oh, I have a dice with 8 sides and it just looks like a chart with all the probability values that are in there. And what's kind of cute then is if you were to maybe add, you can add 2 dice together, hook up a slider to it, and this is just your Python code just becomes so much more visual, right? And it kind of feels like more people should maybe get that as well. Like this is also like something I would love to see more libraries do more of. Like think more in terms of like, hey, we're building tools for a notebook. Like there
Can you tell
are
me,
like,
can you tell us a little bit more about app mode? Like,
oh sure.
is
So
that, can you, how far can you go with that? Like, in the sense, can you deploy basically web applications this
yeah,
way?
yeah.
Do you see people putting auth in front of it and stuff? You know, how does it, what are
So we
people doing?
don't. Well, so like there is a demo on our GitHub where there's a fast API app in front of this, and then fast API handles the auth for you. The because Marimo is built on top of Starlet, so like if you really want to do a proper integration, it helps if you're building something that's like Starlet compatible. I will say there's like a few ways to deploy things inside of Marimo. So one way you could do it is you could say, oh, let's deploy this to WASM, right? And then you can put auth in front of that. Another thing that you could also do is say, no, let's deploy on like a proper Python backend because we need like GPU support or what have you, right? Um, if you want to take a notebook and run it in edit mode, you would call from the command line Marimo edit notebook file. If you wanted to do something like, oh, actually run it as a web app, you would do Marimo run instead. So that's the main, like from the developer experience, that's the main distinction.
Okay. Yeah, it looks really cool. I need to give it another go. This is
Like,
like a really targeted way
I'm,
to snipe me into Marimo that you have
it's
come
not.
up with right now.
Trust me when I say it wasn't just you that got nerd sniped by the gamepad, by the way. um, but like, uh, I'm also just still kind of scratching the surface of what you can do with Marimo. It's like we are really good at making releases to the extent that like a lot of our team members don't always know about all the features just because we ship so much stuff. Like that's actually we had a small little meeting about that the other day. Um, Definitely expect us to keep on adding features. Um, you can also definitely expect us to build something cool over the summer and that we're probably hopefully going to announce in September. So that's also something to look forward to. But the main thing that I really hope to get across here, these are all just tools, right? But please, like, expand. Like, it's we're not upgrading a notebook here. We're trying to upgrade your imagination as well. So, if you take anything away from this, it's really not so much like use Marimo. Use Marimo. It's really cool. Like, use it. But I want people to dream a little bit more. Like, that's more kind of the point. Especially because like pretty soon we might be able to generate these widgets by talking to an LLM, right? And that might become a really big part of the future of how you work in a notebook. But in order to get there, I do need people to sort of let the idea of what the old way of working in a notebook was. I needed to have people to let that go a little bit. Because it's precisely what Brett Victor said in that great talk. Um, we don't really know what the future is going to be yet, so we're going to try a whole bunch of stuff. And we can be really creative, but only if we allow ourselves to be, right? So that's the
Um,
main sort of
yeah, no, that's great. That's end on Brett Victor. Can't go wrong.
yeah.
Um, can you tell me a little bit before we go,
Yeah.
how does Marimo make money? Like, can we, is there a paid aspect, some kind of hosted version, something? How does it go?
So there's nothing I can, let me put it this way. I can't announce anything on that front just yet, but one thing I can say is historically there was it was two people before, and they got a grant which allowed them to work for like I think a good year and a half on Marimo. And then at some point the choice was made to go with the VC route. So this is seed funding that we're at. It was a round led by some pretty big chiefs. Anthony from Kaggle, it was in there. I think was McKinney in there. Like big group of old school CTOs that wanted to do a seed round. So we're in that. The focus right now within the group is definitely like let's just make open source really really good, and let's see if we can get like a good community around it. That's the like I would argue primary goal. You can definitely imagine there's going to be at some point a version of Marimo that does some enterprisey stuff as well. And that's something that will definitely be explored. But what you're seeing right here and right now, this is, I believe, MIT licensed. It's on GitHub. This is not going to go away anytime soon. Like we're not going to do a rug pull on something that's open source right now. That's not going to happen.
All right, sounds great. This is really great. I will, Vincent, if you don't mind sharing the notebook or GitHub, wherever it's located.
If you
And
go
then
to the
okay, go ahead.
so if you go to koning.mo/mo label, uh, yeah, so you can actually play with this thing on GitHub Pages because it is WASM compatible. But the notebook that I'm using right now, bulk.py, is on the GitHub repo itself. The data sets that you need are also self-contained in there.
Okay, Mo label. Got
All
it.
the plugins that I make on behalf that are kind of like Marimo related, they all start with Mo. So there's Mo HTML, there's Mopad, Mo Talk, Mo Paint, Mo Label.
Nice. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you so much for coming. I will post notes with all these links, including, the drawing pad and all everyone wants to know what everyone just wants the link. They just want to buy it. So I will figure it out and I will
Mo Paint, Mo Paint. You can go to the. You can also go here and immediately play with Mo Paint. It's gonna load. It's gonna work from GitHub Action from
oh,
GitHub.
what I mean is the drawing, your hardware.
Oh, that thing.
Uh,
Yeah. Okay. There's a Calm code. Okay. So if you go to calmcode.io, you scroll all the way at the bottom, and then there's this meta category, and there's content that is basically a small course that I made 5 years ago. All of it is pretty relevant still, just a different drawing tablet. Um,
oh, that's your website, Comcode?
It's one of them. I have a few at this point, but like Calm Code is a learning thing I made over COVID. It is probably the cheapest data camp alternative you will ever see. It has like 106 courses about all sorts of Python and data topics. If people want to know more about like stuff that I do like day to day, I also have a blog as well as a Substack if people are interested. Um, and I guess like the final, like there's two things, yeah, a couple of personal plugs actually. I have a personal YouTube channel where I tend to review these ergonomic keyboards. The one thing I want to say to that is the ergonomic keyboard doesn't fix everything. But I've met a couple of people that really ruined their wrists in their career, and I'm super happy that I'm not one of them. I was early enough. Do take that stuff serious. And if you want to have honest reviews, definitely go here. But if you ever feel like wrist pain, take that serious. Do exercises, talk to a physiotherapist. Don't ignore it. It could risk a career. Like that is a thing I do want to maybe mention explicitly. And
Yeah,
then
I know people like that for sure.
yeah, and so you just want to prevent it. There's a couple of really good boards that help you do that. This is one of them, but full reviews can be found over here. And then a final thing, in this age of like LLMs and stuff, I'm also interested in writing software that's just a little bit more human. And this is more like personal project territory, and this is more like I'm sure some people find this interesting. But one thing I made a while ago is this service called Dear Me Email. The way it works is you can send yourself an email and you get it back in 30 days, and that's it. It's kind of like a way to reflect, if that makes sense. I made this a while ago. I gave it a little boost now because I want to sort of get back into this human software a bit more. I know of at least one guy that was dealing with alcoholism that ended up sending himself emails, and it actually ended up helping a whole lot because it's really hard to be critical against yourself. Like if you yourself are reminding yourself of like goals that you've set and you're failing, there's something about that is really impactful. So if that sounds interesting, definitely come talk to me about that as well. And another thing I'm currently working on, I've noticed that it's very tempting to keep on asking ChatGPT for things to the extent that like I actually want to know things myself as well, like from the top of my mind. So I'm also exploring like a variation of Anki that's just live and it's free and it's out there. Next week I'm also going to add gamepad support for this. But I'm definitely interested also like from the point of view from of a developer. It's really great that we have these LLMs at our disposal, but I would hate it if you become so dependent on it that at some point it becomes kind of a learned helplessness kind of a thing. So if people are interested in maybe exploring that with me as well, definitely reach out to me on socials too. These are like side projects
Does
that I'm
this
definitely involved.
like project potentially pull from your existing conversation history to find
I
repeated
might
things or something, or where
I
you?
might go there. I might go there. For now, though, I just the thing I want to focus on now is just that, oh, if you're on the bus, the mobile experience is just nice. And oh, if you want to use a gamepad, that is just kind of nice. Step two would be how do you generate these flashcards to start with? But part of me is also wondering, like, maybe the act of building the flashcards yourself and being very conscious about that is also good for like deliberate practice, if that makes sense. So I'm definitely eager to explore the LLM generates flashcard thing later, but for now, I just want to iron out lots of other things. It's more like, hey, do other people also have this feeling of I'm becoming too dependent on these LLMs? Would it be good to maybe invest in a few apps like this? If people are interested in that, then definitely also reach out to me because that's definitely territory that I'm personally exploring right now.
Okay, yeah, we should talk. You should also talk to Isaac. Isaac and I work with a company called
Yeah, I read
Anki
about
Hub.
that.
Oh, okay.
I read about that. No, like we will talk about that later. There's like there's like one thing I'm wondering is if I want to make like a remember, like a card flashcard thing that's specific for developers, or if I want to keep it general. Because
Hmm.
I'm having the impression that actually it makes sense to maybe do something bespoke for developers. Because especially if you put like an LM in the mix, you can actually make something that's a bit more bespoke. But we'll talk about that later.
Okay, great. There's so much. Do you have a site that has all your things on it? Like, like in one, like, hey, I have doing this project, this other
Yeah,
project,
so
whatever. Okay.
I once a month I try to send an email of like, hey, here's stuff that I've been working on that seems pretty neat. And also, I people should blog more about prompts that they like. By the way, if you
Oh,
have a today I
I
learned
wish
section,
people did. Yeah.
oh, like I don't want to be on LinkedIn to get signals like this. I want to be like on the normal internet.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I try to share prompts as well. Like today I learned thing from Simon Willison. I just try to do as much as possible. Um, Okay, yeah. And I try to learn in public. That's kind of the person that I am. So if people are interested in that, I have a Substack. You can also, I'm also very active on like Discords these days. So the Marimo one, the Any Widget one. I'm also like in the Fast HTML one from time to time. But Discord is also where people can find me. And I'm on Twitter and places. But um,
All
yeah.
right. Okay, I promise this is goodbye now. We can actually say goodbye. Um,
It was a good
yeah,
session. It was fun. Let's
yeah,
hang out again. It was
yeah,
fun.
yeah. We should totally do that. That was really cool. I'm gonna try to hook up my my gamepad after this, and I'm gonna check this out. But you have
Sweet.
successfully sniped me into Marimo, so
Sweet.
I'm gonna give
Sweet.
it a go.
Mission accomplished. I can now have a cake.
Yeah,
Cool. Then everyone, thanks for listening. It was a pretty full crowd as well. So that was also very nice to see.
yeah, yeah. A lot of people will be getting the recording, so I'm gonna
Sweet.
be sending it to all the students. All right. Well,
Cool.
thank you.
Perfect. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks.